It is almost here. Hurricane Irene is curving closer and closer to tens of millions of people. Waves and wind already kicking up, and the first rains will soak the southeast today. This is a big storm, hundreds of miles across, and even from space, it is a monster. An astronaut on the International Space Station called the view terrifying. And we've got crews deployed up and down the East Coast. We will hear from Reynolds Wolf in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. John Zarella is a little south of there in Atlantic Beach. Susan Candiotti reports from Fire Island, New York. Mary Snow is in New York City. And here in the hurricane headquarters, Jackie Jarris. Let's start with Reynolds Wolf in North Carolina's Outer Banks. Reynolds, they're bracing for a direct hit, aren't they?
They certainly are. You know, one of the most troubling things about this area is just really the area itself and how it's so susceptible to these tropical systems. When you think about the Outer Banks, North Carolina, first and foremost, you have to think about the waters offshore. Got a couple things coming into play. First and foremost, to our south, we've got a current that we refer to as the Gulf Stream. That works its way to the north. Then you have a few fingers of the Labrador Current that's a colder current that comes in from the north. Then you have them converge right off of Cape Hatteras. Now, what happens, you also have a bunch of navigational hazards right offshore. They refer to this area as the graveyard of the Atlantic. Then you have the Outer Banks themselves, Jim. The Outer Banks are just a ribbon of about 200 miles worth of sand, the widest point being about 3 miles. It's not really that high above sea level. In fact, in some places, it's only 7 to 10 feet, 11 feet at its highest points along these barrier islands. So when you think about a big tropical system, a hurricane, a Category 2, maybe a Category 3, with a storm surge of anywhere from, say, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 11, 12 feet, you can see how dangerous things get. Because the possibility of that the storm coming closer, Irene, again, looks like it's got a bead right on the Outer Banks. They have had some evacuations. Many people began evacuating earlier in the week. They had the official evacuation for visitors on the island. They averaged about 150,000 on just a summer day in August. But then you have people that live along this barrier island year-round, some 35,000. Those evacuations are going to take place today as of 8 o'clock. They're going to begin, and people are going to leave. Now, here's what's interesting, though. They call it a mandatory evacuation, but there are people that will be staying here. And I got to tell you, one person that has lived on these islands for the last 30 years, Bobby Outen, who works for the Dare County Management Office, he already laid out what he considers to be his nightmare scenario.
Worst case scenario for us is a storm coming up the Sounds with the eastern side coming up the Outer Banks, which is what the track right now does. Then it becomes size and speed, and we have a storm that's moving at, I don't know, 10 or 12 the last I saw, that's projected at a 3 or maybe a high 2, which is a big storm for us. And so that's our worst case scenario, and we're in it.
Okay, so think about that for a moment. You have the system moving to the north. You have a strip of sand that juts out in the Atlantic. Then, of course, as this comes up, counterclockwise rotation, the first thing that's going to happen, you're going to have the rain, you're going to have the wind, but also a great deal of storm surge that's going to roll off the top half from the Atlantic. Then you have the back bays, you've got the estuaries, you've got the intercoastal waterway, the Sounds. That's going to bring an additional massive water in from the back half of this rotating storm. So, again, it's kind of a 1-2 punch they're going to be dealing with easily for the next 24 to 36 hours. Let's pitch it back to you, Jim.
Good information, Reynolds. Thanks so much. New Yorkers are in unfamiliar territory right now, trying to get their heads around a hurricane that could swamp the city. Mayor Michael Bloomberg is considering mandatory evacuations, and his decision could come today. Mary Snow has the details. And Mary, you know, this is kind of scary to think about because so much of lower Manhattan is susceptible to this kind of storm surge. Which areas are likely to be evacuated?
Yeah, Jim, and we are here in Lower Manhattan, which is one big area of concern because it's such a low-lying area. There are a couple of pockets throughout the city, and if there were mandatory evacuations, it would be really focused on these zones that are most at risk. So Lower Manhattan, as you see, going up through Battery Park, the area near Ground Zero. Also in some of the outer boroughs, Staten Island, which is behind me, parts of Brooklyn, Coney Island, also seen as vulnerable, and the Rockaways. And the mayor saying that he will make that decision by tomorrow morning around 8 o'clock on whether to order those evacuations. But he's telling New Yorkers, you know, to be prepared. If you are in areas that look like they are in those zones that are most vulnerable, to consider going and staying with relatives.
We're looking at And Mary, we're showing some animation right now of what looks like water coming ashore on both sides of the Hudson River. Is that basically sort of the situation we're looking at in the worst case scenario if that storm surge is severe?
In the worst case scenario, and again, you know, it's still too early to tell what kind of impact New York would feel. It's expected that New York would feel this impact by Sunday, and we should be getting an update within a couple of hours from the city in terms of what their plans are. But yeah, we've talked to a number of hurricane experts also who say it wouldn't take a major hurricane to hit in order to cause significant flooding, because the real worry is these storm surges and the flooding in some of these areas.
Mary Snow in Lower Manhattan for us. Thank you, Mary. And meteorologist Jackie Jarris is tracking the storm as it closes in on the East Coast. And Jackie, I guess a lot of folks are concerned about the timetable, exactly when this is going to strike. I know things are moving minute by minute, but what can you tell us?
Right. Well, we don't want you to focus on just landfall, because the impacts of the storm are already beginning to move in, and you're feeling this across parts of the Carolinas, and that part of that has to do with how huge the storm is. Now, the eye itself is somewhere between 300, 200 miles away from the coastline, and it's moving due north. And if it continues due north, we'd be looking at landfall just east of I-40 and just west of Cape Lookout. So that's the big impact zone in terms of the hurricane force winds and the worst of the storm surge. But we're already feeling the impacts with the winds. Look at this, 32-mile-per-hour winds, 33 sustained winds. So we are getting close to tropical storm force sustained winds, and that's going to be moving in this afternoon. So you need to rush to complete those preparation plans. You should be done, but if you're not done, hurry up and get out of there. If you're in the evacuation zone, we're going to watch these bands increase throughout the day today. The rain's going to come down heavy, and as we get those most intense thunderstorms move in, we'll watch those winds continue to pick up even more. By the way, Florida's still getting hit with this storm as well, with the showers and the thunder showers and some of those heavy winds. Now, the winds, how strong are they? The maximum 110 miles per hour. So if this is the first time you've tuned in on this, that's down from the major Category 3 storm we had yesterday, but by 1 mile an hour. 1 mile an hour, that's it. 111, that's what it needs to be a major hurricane. It's been going through what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. That means when the eye wall kind of collapses a little bit, but a new one develops on the outside of it, and ultimately that can close in and make it a stronger storm. So this could go back up to a 3, and that's what you need to be prepared for. We do have a little bit of dry air trying to make its way into there. That could, you know, impact the intensity just a little bit. Now, let's talk about some of the rainfall that's going to be coming in with this too. Take a look at that. All that dark purple, that's between 6 and 12 inches of rain. We're talking about inland flooding as well as the coastal flooding, not to mention all the power outages we're going to be expecting with that. All right, let's talk a little bit more about that timing. That northerly direction will continue, and we'll watch the worst of the conditions begin to move in overnight tonight. Landfall will likely be sometime tomorrow, and then it's going to move its way up towards Norfolk and Virginia Beach, up towards the Delmarva, and then into the northeast. And this is going to be right in through here. It's pretty much an all-day Sunday event, and then we'll likely continue into early Monday morning for parts of New England. So we've got a long way to go with this storm impacting millions of people. Those models are coming together much more so now, Jim, in terms of their consensus. And so it's looking very likely we have 1, probably 2 landfalls to go with this storm.
And as you said, I mean, the worsening conditions will be happening tonight. So if folks are waiting until the last second to evacuate those areas, they might want to rethink that and start planning now to get out now.
Right, and some of those bridges will close down just from tropical storm force winds. That will bring up enough surge and enough high water to close them off. So you don't have a lot of time.
All right, Jackie Jarris, thanks so much. Maryland is one of the states in Irene's path. The governor there, Martin O'Malley, has declared a state of emergency. Next hour, he is holding a news conference, and we'll have more on that when it happens. Overseas, there has been a deadly bomb attack at the UN building in Nigeria's capital. Let's get straight to Zane Vergie in London with the latest. Zane, this sounds very serious.
It is. At least 7 people have been killed, and more than that number have been injured, some seriously. The bomb squad is on the scene. Security forces also on the scene. They are reporting that there was apparently a car bomb that went to the side of the United Nations building. And what happened was, Jim, is that one of the walls just collapsed. It was an area, one witness says, where the reception was, as well as offices. And when the wall caved in, it just fell on people, and that's when the casualties occurred. By the way, this is a diplomatic area, Jim, and the U.S. Embassy is very close to where the United Nations headquarters are. Apparently, because it was a diplomatic area and the Liberian embassy was there as well, it wasn't actually that busy with so many people teeming around during the time of day. It happened, according to one witness, about 10:15 in the morning local time. What's happening now is that more casualties are being taken out of the debris by the Red Cross, and they're going into the hospitals that weren't even properly staffed, so they were calling in extra nurses and doctors to try and help.